Hello and welcome to this presentation for the Royal Horticultural Society's Level 3 Certificate in Practical Horticulture, brought to you by Best in Horticulture. This forms part of Topic 5, which is Productive Growing, and is presented by Mike Roberts. This is the fourth element in Topic 5, and it deals with the cultivation of herbs. As usual, a quick look at the syllabus from the RHS. And in the knowledge part of this particular element, we need to know the advantages and limitations of different growing systems. So we'll be looking at protected cropping, open ground and containers. We'll also be having a quick look at the factors when planning a herb garden to include space and cultivars and containment and use. As part of the application part of the syllabus, you'll be actually actively growing a range of herbs, and here you'll need to consider cultivar selection, sowing, planting, weed control, crop nutrition and harvest. And we'll briefly look at the integration elements when we get to that part of the presentation. So first of all, just a quick introduction into what we actually mean by herbs. Herbs are the leafy parts of a plant that are used in cooking or medicine, and they can be used either fresh or dried. And although the term herb is derived from the term herbaceous, they also include woody plants such as lavender and bay. But what about spices? Any other part of the plant, which is usually dried, is referred to as a spice. And this can include a number of different parts of the plant. For example, the bark. An example here would be cinnamon. Dried berries, familiar here with peppercorns. The seeds of some plants, for example cumin, and roots, which might include ginger or turmeric. Some spices are the ground up buds of plants, for example clove, and others include the stamens taken from flowers, and here we've got the example being saffron. A word or two about the history of herb cultivation. Herbs are amongst the oldest and most widely cultivated plants, valued for their culinary, medicinal and other properties. They've been cultivated since ancient times, and amongst the first writers to describe the cultivation of herbs were the ancient Greeks. One of the works that is most available to this day is written by Dioscorides, and it's his De Materia Medica, which was written around 50 AD or 50 CE. More recently, Nicholas Culpeper published The Complete Herbal in 1653, and this is still a staple work dealing with the cultivation and uses of herbs. The popularity of TV cookery programmes has popularised the use of culinary herbs, which are now freely available in UK supermarkets. And horticulturalist and author Jekka McVicker writes extensively on the cultivation and use of an extensive range of herbs, and has been instrumental in bringing them to the forefront of horticultural and gardening practice. You'll need to know a little bit about the growing systems available for the cultivation of herbs and their advantages and limitations. And these need to include protected cropping, growing in containers, and in the open ground. So we'll start first of all with protected cropping. This mostly involves the commercial production of herbs as a crop for drying, fresh sales in supermarkets, and container plants for garden centres. More recently, growers have been experimenting with hydroponic cultivation of herbs. Many herbs, because of their requirement for free draining environments, are not automatically suitable for hydroponics, and yet some experimenters are finding success in this method of growing. So the advantages and limitations of protected cropping include, firstly, that crops are produced earlier in the season, and this can make them command a higher market price. Crops can be grown at higher densities, potentially higher crop yield up to 50% more, less field losses occurring. Enhanced productivity. Operations can be carried out more effectively under cover by crop workers. And there's also minimal infestation by weeds and less loss of water and nutrients to competition. It minimises the use of plant protection products, often less pests are present in crops, and structures can be made pest-proof. And finally, the climate within the structure can be controlled to enhance growth. There are, however, limitations, and these include protected structures which are expensive to erect and maintain. It can be difficult to control the climate within the structures without investment in heating and ventilation systems. There can be less room for crop workers when harvesting crops within protected structures, and the crops will definitely require irrigation systems. The structures themselves can be badly damaged by extremes of weather, and an environmental cost comes from the disposal of used polythene covers, which can be both difficult and expensive. Next, we have container production, and this will include commercial production of potted herbs for supermarket sales, the container production for garden centres and nurseries, and garden cultivation in pots, troughs and window boxes. So with containers, the advantages include the possibility of growing a greater number of plants in an area, and here we could cite the example of using tower systems for growing herbs. Plants which have invasive tendencies, for example mentha species, can be closely controlled. Pots can be moved as necessary and placed under cover to protect them from during cropping. Nutritional requirements can be optimised for greater productivity, and it's potentially easier to harvest herbs as container-grown plants, especially if they're grown on benches. Limitations include specialised benches and container systems can be expensive to set up initially. Plants require a greater level of husbandry, for example watering and nutrition. Nutritional deficiencies are more likely to occur compared with plants grown in the open ground. And finally, not all herbs are suited to growing in containers. And lastly, we'll consider growing herbs in the open ground. This could be the field scale production of herbs that are suited to local soil and abiotic factors, or it could be the small scale production to satisfy local demand. And on the domestic front, herb gardens can make attractive garden features. Advantages here include it's inexpensive to set up specific areas for growing, certainly cheaper than a protected structure like a polythene tunnel or glasshouse. Plants require less intensive management as they're growing in the open ground rather than in a container which relies on irrigation and supplemental nutrition. And plants can be given more space in the open ground, making it easier to carry out cultural operations and mechanical harvesting. Limitations include not all soils are suitable for growing herbs, e.g. for some rich soils can lead to soft growth, which is susceptible to pests and diseases, and a great many herbs require very free draining soil, which may not be available in your area. Plants growing in soil are subject to soil-borne pests and predation from birds, mammals and insects. We'll next turn our attention to a few comments on planning a herb garden. With a few exceptions, most culinary and medicinal herbs are small plants, which makes them ideal for garden cultivation. Where space permits, a dedicated herb garden can make a useful and attractive garden feature, and formal gardens with a geometric layout traditionally have been popular, back to historical times. Where there isn't space for a dedicated herb garden, herbs can be incorporated into garden borders. Indeed, many herbs have attractive foliage and indeed flowers, including Salvia officinalis purpurescens, the purple-leaved sage, Feniculum vulgaris purpureum, purple fennel, and golden marjoram, Origanum vulgariorium. In the shrub border, or at the back of a border, notable shrubs will include Laurus nobilis, the bay, Salvia rosmarinus, rosemary, and lavender. If we're growing them in a herb garden or in the open ground, we'll need to consider the soil and aspect required. Many popular herb species originate in Mediterranean climates and therefore need free draining soils and an open, sunny aspect. Examples would include rosemary, lavender, hyssop and salvia, sage. There are, however, herbs that are more shade tolerant and tolerant of more heavier, less perfectly drained soils, including mint, oregano, angelica, hyssop, parsley, chives and lemon balm. When it comes to plant selection, the choice can be bewildering. There are over 3,000 herbs which are grown for their medicinal culinary use. However, we've divided them here into herbs being annuals, biennials, perennials, subshrubs and shrubs. Just a selection of these would include, as annuals, we have things like basil, Ocimum basilicum. This comes in quite a wide range of varieties, from the European basil to Thai basil and other flavours. Coriander, Coriandrum sativum, grown for its foliage, but also for its seeds, which are ground to form a spice. Parsley, Petroselenium crispum, which is the curly parsley, or there's a flat-leaved variety as well. This is technically a biennial, but mostly grown as an annual. And finally dill, Anathum graveolens, again grown each year as an annual plant. The majority of herbs that we grow would fall into the category of herbaceous perennials. These include chive, Allium schoenoprasum, the mints, Mentha spicata, sorrels, here we've got Rumex sanguineus, the bloody sorrel, and French tarragon, Artemisia dracunculus. Subshrubs are small shrubs which produce very soft new growth but a woody base. And these include some popular herbs such as hyssop, Hyssopus vulgare, oregano, Origanum vulgare, common sage, Salvia officinalis, and thyme, Thymus vulgaris. And finally, true shrubs, which include bay, Laurus nobilis, lavender, Lavandula angustifolia in its cultivars, rosemary, the now renamed Salvia rosmarinus, and germander or shrubby germander, Teucrium chamadris. This latter plant is used as a medicinal herb for the treatment of gout, but it also makes a useful low-growing hedge as a supplement or an alternative to box. In planning the herb garden, we also perhaps need to think about the use that herbs can be put. And we should choose the herbs which are most suitable for the use to which we want to put them. And herbs have many uses, including culinary, commonly used bay, basil, chives, tarragon, thyme, mint, amongst others. But we may also choose to grow herbs for their cosmetic and perfume use. Examples here would include chamomile, which is a widely grown herb used to treat headaches, pot marigold, and the apothecary rose, Rosa gallica, which is used for its perfumed petals. Herbs can also be used for dyeing and to produce dyes to colour cloth and yarn, and here examples might be rose madder or the common sorrel. Herbs have long been prized for their medicinal value, and common herbs with medicinal properties include chamomile, as we've previously mentioned, fennel, Feniculum vulgare, feverfew, Tanacetum parthenium, and peppermint, Mentha crosspipirata. We should here note a word of caution that some plants grown as herbs can be toxic if not treated correctly or used in inappropriate amounts. See page 15 in the course notes for further details on this important matter. It should also be worth here mentioning those herbs which do require a degree of containment. Only a few herbs require containment, and this is entirely due to their root structure or rhizomes, or the ability to seed freely. This can mean that they can be potentially invasive in a garden setting. The following are some examples. All the mints are potentially invasive. for example peppermint, Mentha cross piperita, and the spearmint, Mentha spicata. Penny royal, which is a member of the mint family, Mentha polygium. And comfrey, Symphytum species. This sets seed extremely freely and also multiplies rapidly, often hybridizing with other species. Bee balm bergamot, Monarda didyma, forms clumps and also spreads by seed. And lemon balm can be particularly invasive, Melissa officinalis, spreading by seed very freely. The solution here, grow in containers or install root barriers around the plant, or cut back the plant before it sets seed. So as part of the course you'll be required to cultivate a range of herbs. In the course notes we've provided crop profiles for a range of herbs, and these profiles cover propagation, the range of cultivars that are available for each species, the size of plant, its soil and site requirements, harvesting and storage. So finally, to integration, we need to consider here the benefits of protected structures for the propagation of young plants. And the advantage of protected structures has been covered earlier in this presentation and is discussed fully in topic 6 on protected growing. The importance of evidence-based decisions in productive growing. Here the evidence-based decision making is a method that uses relevant data and experiential evidence to make decisions. By setting out to obtain information and making decisions based on the experience and using the data usually leads to better outcomes. We'll also need to implement findings of recent horticultural research as it applies to the cultivation of herbs. And here we can draw on a range of sources that are all conducting or carrying out research into cultivation techniques. The Agriculture and Horticultural Development Board, the RHS themselves, and the National Herb Centre all produce updates and technical documents on growing herbs. So, what next? As usual, further details are available in your course notes. For the practical part of your course, you'll be required to select cultivars for a range of herbs and produce a schedule for a site. And you can also undertake your own research into current best practice for growing herbs. So that brings us to the end of this presentation, a little shorter than some of them. So thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful and look forward to seeing you again on a future best presentation. So this is Mike Roberts saying goodbye. Thank you.